The chandeliers above glimmered like frozen tears, casting gold over the laughter that didn't belong to me. My daughter, my only daughter, stood at the podium in her $15,000 Vera Wang gown, her diamond earrings catching every camera flash like tiny lightning strikes. Caroline looked perfect, radiant, poised, the picture of everything her mother once dreamed she'd become. And then she opened her mouth and turned that dream into a weapon. Not directly, no. She didn't have to say the words, "My father killed my mother." She just let them hang between the lines. "Dad was too broke to save her," she said, with that trembling smile that made her sound so sincere. "Mom died ashamed of the man she married." Her voice wavered at all the right beats, the way she'd practiced since she was a girl performing in school plays. Around her, the Sterling family nodded along like a jury ready to deliver a verdict. Their hedge fund friends smirked into their champagne. The laughter rippled soft and poisonous across the ballroom, and me. I sat in the back corner table 12 alone with my silence. The cheap linens smelled faintly of bleach. My water glass trembled slightly in my hand, catching the light. I set it down carefully, one finger at a time, because Caroline had no idea what kind of man she was trying to bury in public. No idea that the failure she mocked had $33 million quietly sitting in a Chase account under federal confidentiality. No idea that the quiet man at table 12 still had the power to end empires. Trust me, you'll want to see what happens next. My name is Matt Thompson. I'm 62 years old, and for 3 decades I was a military contractor specializing in classified defense systems, projects that never made headlines but kept the country breathing. It was work that paid well, obscenely well, but it demanded silence, total discretion. So my wife, Margaret, and I lived modestly in a 3-bedroom house in Stamford, Connecticut. Used cars, Jersey Shore vacations, dinner coupons, and Friday movie nights. Not because we had to, but because Margaret believed in raising Caroline right. Don't spoil her with wealth, she'd tell me. Let her learn to build herself first. She was a kindergarten teacher for 28 years. 45 grand a year, never once complained. The kind of woman who packed her own lunch and still donated half her Christmas bonus to the PTA fund. I adored her for that. She made me believe the world was simple. Caroline never knew what we had. She thought her father just worked on computers for the government. She thought her mom was a saint and her dad a steady, average man. That illusion lasted until the winter of 2014. Margaret felt a lump during a routine invasive ductal carcinoma, stage 2. The doctor said maybe 18 months with treatment. Maybe. I didn't take maybe. I liquidated everything. Sold my stakes in 3 defense startups. Cashed out my Pentagon consulting retainer. I burned through favors. Pulled every string I had in military medicine. Johns Hopkins experimental immunotherapy, $180,000 per cycle. Proton beam radiation at Mass General, $95,000 per session. Clinical trials in Switzerland, $40,000 just to get in the door. Caroline watched me write check after check. Watched the house go up for sale. She saw only what I allowed her to see. Her father bleeding himself dry to save her mother. But what she didn't see was the current flowing quietly beneath the surface. 3 months after Margaret's diagnosis, The Pentagon awarded me the largest cyber defense contract in U.S. history, $47.5 million over 5 years. Completely classified. 6 months later, one of my startups went public. The shares I'd sold were still mine under a lockup clause. When that IPO hit, those hidden shares were worth $31 million. Another company I'd built security systems for was bought out by Northrop Grumman, triggering back-end royalties an $18 million check in a single afternoon. By the time Margaret went into hospice in 2015, we were beyond wealthy. But I couldn't tell her, couldn't tell anyone. The contracts demanded silence. Even my family. Margaret died January 15, 2016. Caroline was 25. At the funeral, she stood up and told the crowd her father had spent everything to save Mom, that he'd lost the house and savings, but never his love. I let her believe it. Let her keep the story neat and tragic. For 8 years, I let my daughter think her father was a failure to broke, too small to save the woman he loved. Caroline went on with her life. Marketing job in Manhattan, $65,000 a year. A shoebox apartment for $2,800 a month. She started dating upward finance boys, consulting heirs, men who could afford her growing taste for luxury, and I let her. I stayed small, bought a modest condo for cash, drove my old Honda Civic, shopped at Target. Meanwhile, her student loans mysteriously disappeared. Her credit cards somehow paid themselves off. When she needed a deposit for a new apartment, an anonymous check appeared in her mailbox. She never asked why. Then came Reginald Sterling, hedge fund royalty. His family's name engraved on buildings in Greenwich. They lived like old money never died Range Rovers, estates, summers in the Hamptons. Caroline was enthralled. Finally, she said, she'd made it. The Sterlings tolerated me with the polite disdain reserved for servants who spoke out of turn. Whitman Sterling Jr., Reginald's father, once patted me on the shoulder at Christmas and said, "You've done well, considering your limitations." I smiled, said nothing. The quiet man in the corner always remembers. What Caroline never knew was what her mother said to me during those morphin-hazy nights before the end-when truth stripped everything bare. "She's losing herself, Matt," Margaret whispered. "Our daughter's turning cruel." I didn't want to believe it then, but tonight, I see it written all over her face. The wedding was a spectacle of excess. The Ashworth Estate Country Club in Greenwich. $85,000 just for the venue. 180 guests dressed like magazine covers, sipping $200 champagne. Carolyn gleamed under the lights like she was born to be adored. She made sure I wore my old navy blue Men's Warehouse suit. "Don't try to rent anything fancy, Dad," she'd said. "You'll just look uncomfortable." I walked her down the aisle, gave her away, smiled for the camera when they said, "Look proud, Mr. Thompson." And I was proud. Until the dinner began, they'd seated me near the kitchen doors, at table 12, beside a half-deaf great-aunt and 2 cousins who looked like they'd drawn the short straw. The head table, drenched in orchids and candlelight, shone like a stage. Caroline between Reginald and his father, laughing like she belonged there. During cocktail hour, I'd overheard the talk: Ferraris, hedge fund bonuses, private schools. One groomsman asked Caroline how she'd escaped her circumstances. She laughed. "Good genes and better taste." Then came the speech. She tapped her champagne flute. The room silenced. Every eye turned toward her. I want to thank everyone for being here on the most important day of my life. Applause, smiles, the practiced charm of a perfect bride. Then her tone shifted. My father tried his best, she said, but he never really amounted to anything. The crowd shifted uneasily. After Mom died, he gave up on success. On life, she looked straight at me. I'm not proud of it, but there were times I was embarrassed by him, by his limitations. A ripple of laughter. Whitman Sterling Jr. nodded approvingly, smug. Caroline smiled wider. Thankfully, I found Reginald Dand. Through him, I found a family that taught me what real success looks like. The room erupted into applause. She raised her glass toward to the people who showed me that class isn't an accident of birth, it's a choice. Then she looked back at me, and to my real father, sitting over there at table 12, who did his best with what he had, even if it wasn't very much. Laughter again, softer this time, crueler. I sat perfectly still, my heartbeat a slow drum in my chest. 30 seconds of silence as the applause faded. Then I reached inside my jacket. Caroline had no idea what I'd carried all these years, what I'd been saving for this very moment. It wasn't a weapon. It was something far more devastating. Margaret's rose gold iPhone 7 Plus, the one she'd used during her final weeks in hospice. The one holding a single voice memo I hadn't listened to since the night after her funeral. I slipped away from table 12, through the clatter of the bar, past the photo booth, where Caroline posed with her new family, her laughter echoing through the hall like glass breaking. Near the coat check, I pressed play. Margaret's voice sweet, but steady filled the quiet. Matt, if you're listening to this, it means I'm gone. I need you to know something about Caroline. She's become cruel. Not just selfish cruel. Last week, when the nurse helped me to the bathroom, Caroline asked when I was finally going to die so you could get back to normal. Those were her exact words. The sound of Margaret's breath faltered. I felt my hands go cold. She told me she was embarrassed by you, that she wished she'd been born into a better family. I heard her on the phone with that Sterling boy, laughing about how her working-class father would never fit into their world. Her voice cracked. Please, Matt, don't let her forget who she really is. The recording ended. The ballroom lights flickered from across the hall. Laughter, music, clinking glasses, all of it, blurred dot. In that moment, I knew exactly what to do next. And when the music stopped, everyone in that room would finally understand why you never humiliate the quiet man in the corner. The ballroom lights gleamed like molten gold as the weight of silence pressed in. Every crystal glimmered, every glass trembled with the breath no one dared take. Margaret's voice faded from the speakers, her last words echoing through the stunned quiet. Promise me you won't enable her with money. Promise me you'll make her earn her character the hard way. And for 8 long years, I had done just that. I had watched my daughter fight, stumble, climb. I had believed that struggle might shape her into something good. But tonight, she'd done the one thing her mother feared most. She'd sold grace for applause. I looked at Caroline, my daughter, my only child, standing there in her designer gown, shaking, mascara carving black rivers down her cheeks. She looked smaller now, fragile, stripped of the smug confidence that had glowed on her face all evening. Around her, The guests stared in frozen disbelief, unsure whether to look at her or me, or the ghostly phone still connected to the speakers like a confession booth for the dead. That, I said quietly, was your mother's final message, her dying wish. I turned my gaze to the crowd. For 8 years, I honored it. I let her believe we were broke. I let her think I was scraping by, living in a small apartment, eating canned soup and clipping coupons. I wanted her to understand what humility feels like, what it means to earn every inch of your life. I paused, my voice steady now, like a man who'd already walked through fire and come out tempered. But she didn't learn humility. She learned contempt. I lifted my phone, the glow from the screen washing my face in pale blue. So, since we're celebrating truth tonight, and success, and breeding, and all those fine qualities money apparently buys, talk about what real success looks like. The projection lights shimmered across polished marble as I opened the Chase app, tilted the screen toward the nearest guests. This, I said evenly, is my checking account. The number shone bright against the glass. $33,187,432. Gasps rippled through the room. Forks froze midair. Even the DJ, halfway toward the booth, stopped cold. My investment portfolio, managed by Goldman Sachs, I continued, switching screens, is currently worth $41,293,156. The figures gleamed like verdicts in the soft light. So, you see, I didn't fail. I didn't fall. I simply chose silence. Whitman Sterling Jr.'s smirk had vanished. His lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. He looked suddenly ancient beneath the chandeliers, a relic of wealth past its expiration date. I reached into my jacket and pulled free a neatly folded document, the thick paper whispering like a secret. "Here's my military record," I said, holding it aloft. "Defense Superior Service Medal, issued for classified cyber defense work under the Pentagon's Advanced Systems Division. 15 years of service. Top secret clearance." I let that sink in. The last project I completed, the one your tax dollars never heard about, was the largest single defense contract in U.S. history, and $500,000. A woman near the front table covered her mouth with her hand. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." But my favorite part, I continued, the faintest hint of satisfaction curling beneath my tone, isn't in the numbers. I unfolded another document, heavier, older. "The deed," this I said, "is the ownership title for the estate at 247 Meadowbrook Lane, Greenwich. Some of you might recognize the address." A murmur spread like wildfire through the crowd. Whitman Sterling Jr.'s jaw tightened. "That's right," I said softly, stepping closer to the edge of the stage. "The Sterling family home, the ancestral mansion. 12 bedrooms, 4 generations of supposed legacy." I turned the page slowly, savoring the tension. Except it hasn't belonged to the Sterlings since 2009, when I bought it out of bankruptcy for $3.2 million. A shudder rippled through the tables. Caroline's lips parted in disbelief. "You've been renting it from me ever since," I continued, my voice calm, surgical, "for $1 a year. A charitable arrangement to help preserve the illusion of your family's dignity." "You're welcome, Whitman." Whitman's wineglass slipped from his hand and shattered across the floor. "The property's worth $8 million today," I went on. "The taxes, $63,000 a year. Paid by me. The maintenance. 40,000 annually. Paid by me. For 15 years, I've been the quiet benefactor of the family that taught my daughter what real class looks like. The crowd was dead silent now. All that could be heard was the faint hum of the air vents and the slow, shaky breath of the bride who had just lost her mask. Then I turned back to her. Would you like to know what else I've been paying for, Caroline? Her eyes filled with panic. Dad, please, I cut her off. No, sweetheart. You asked for truth tonight. Let's give it to them. I unlocked another file, a spreadsheet. Clean, color-coded, damning. Your student loans, $87,000, paid anonymously over 6 years. Your credit card debt, $43,000, cleared quietly every time you overspent. Your apartment rent and deposits, $91,000, and that BMW X5 you like to brag about. I held up the phone, tilting it just enough for the projection screen behind me to catch the figures. $26,000 in payments, insurance, and maintenance, every penny covered by me. Caroline shook her head, trembling. Why are you doing this? She whispered. Because your mother asked me to, I said. Because you dishonored her memory to impress people who've been living off my generosity for 15 years. The words fell like hammer strikes. I could feel the entire room leaning forward, captivated, horrified, transfixed by the collapse of an illusion they'd believed in. Caroline's perfect life, her polished fiancé, her gilded family, all of it crumbling under the weight of one man's truth. I took a breath, slow, controlled. I'm not done. I reached into my pocket and retrieved one final folded letter, fresh, sealed in cream paper. This, I said, is an email from my estate attorney. It was sent to me this morning. It confirms the final revision of my will. Every camera in the room lifted. Guests recording now. The downfall had become spectacle. I had considered leaving you, Carolyn, everything, I said softly. But as of tonight, those assets, all $74 million of them, will instead fund the Margaret Thompson Foundation for Compassionate Education. It will provide scholarships to underprivileged children, the kind your mother used to teach. Children who know what struggle truly means. I let the silence hang. Caroline's champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered at her feet. And as for you, Whitman, I added, turning toward him, the estate deed will revert to the foundation within 30 days. You and your family have my permission to remain on the property until then, rent-free as a courtesy. He tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. I took a final step toward the mic, looking out over the stunned faces, friends, strangers, witnesses to the death of pretense. Your mother believed in grace, I said. She believed in forgiveness. So do I, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Then I looked at my daughter one last time. The girl I had once lifted onto my shoulders to see fireworks. The girl who'd whispered, I love you, Daddy, in the dark. You could have had everything, I said softly, but you wanted to rise above me. Now you finally have. And with that, I disconnected Margaret's phone, pocketed both devices, and walked off the stage as the chandeliers trembled above and the perfect, golden silence broke into a storm of whispers that would haunt her name forever. The silence that followed was thick enough to drown in. Even the chandeliers above seemed to flicker more softly, as if afraid to draw attention away from what had just been said. I stood there, the words still echoing in the vaulted air. Total anonymous financial assistance to Caroline Thompson, over 8 years, $247,000. The numbers hung in the air like charges in a courtroom. Each zero an accusation, each comma a wound, for 8 long years. I had watched her struggle, but never enough to fail. Every month, I'd quietly pay the shortfall, top off the balance, make sure she could eat and sleep and smile for her friends without knowing the safety net beneath her came from the man she'd tried so hard to erase. Every month, I hoped she'd develop the character her mother dreamed of: compassion, humility, gratitude. Every month, I prayed that she would one day understand what it means to earn something instead of expecting it. But instead, she'd stood at that podium tonight, in front of 180 people, and told them her mother died ashamed of me, that I was a failure, that I'd wasted my life. I could feel the microphone trembling under my fingertips as I spoke again, my voice barely a whisper, but the PA carried every word into every trembling glass of wine. Your mother didn't die ashamed of me, Caroline, I said. She died worried about you. Caroline's sobs were unrestrained now. Makeup streaked her face in black rivers, her perfect posture crumpling under the weight of truth. Reginald, her new husband, sat frozen beside her, pale, twitching, desperate to disappear into his expensive suit. But I wasn't done. Slowly, deliberately, I reached into my jacket and pulled out a thick, cream-colored envelope, the edges crisp, the seal freshly pressed. This morning, I said, I met with my estate attorney. The crowd leaned in. This is my revised will, executed and notarized at exactly 3:30 p.m. today. I held it up for everyone to see, the proof, the punctuation mark of 8 years of silence. My previous will left everything to Caroline, my houses, my investments, my pension, everything. $74 million. Her tear-streaked face lifted for the briefest moment, a flicker of hope. And then I took it away. My new will, I continued, leaves Caroline exactly $1, the same amount her in-laws pay in rent. The hope vanished from her eyes. The rest, I said, goes to the American Cancer Society, in memory of Margaret Thompson, a woman who valued character over wealth, and kindness over class. I folded the will slowly, deliberately, and slipped it back into my pocket. The changes take effect immediately upon my verbal authorization, I said, which I am giving right now in front of all these witnesses. The ballroom had gone deathly still. You could hear the hum of the air vents, the ticking of someone's Rolex, the sharp, wet sound of Caroline's breathing. I turned toward her one last time. Congratulations on your wedding, sweetheart, I said softly. You finally got what you always wanted, a family with real money and real class. I gestured toward the sterling table. Whitman Jr. was staring into his wine glass like it contained poison. Of course, I added, now that you know who actually owns their house, things might be a little awkward at Thanksgiving. A ripple of shock passed through the room. Someone coughed. Someone else stifled a laugh. I disconnected Margaret's phone from the sound system and picked up both devices. Enjoy the rest of your reception, everyone, I said. The bar's already paid for. Then I turned and walked away, 15 feet of quiet, controlled exit before the chaos erupted. Caroline's scream tore through the silence like glass breaking. Not a sob, not a cry, but a raw animal sound of grief and rage. "You can't do this," she screamed. "You can't just destroy my life." She was on her feet now, her $15,000 gown wrinkled, her mascara melting into black veins. 30 years, she cried. 30 years I've been your daughter, and you destroy me in front of everyone. I turned back, calm as ever. 8 years, Caroline, I said. 8 years you let me believe your mother died, ashamed of me. I never said that. I held up Margaret's rose-gold phone. "Would you like me to play the recording again? I have the exact timestamp where your mother quotes your words, word for word." Caroline's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She was drowning on dry land. That's when Reginald finally stood up. "Now wait just a minute," he snapped, his face red with rage. "You can't come to our wedding and humiliate my wife with some fabricated recording." Fabricated? I smiled faintly. I opened the voice memo app on my phone, showing the metadata to the projection screen. January 12, 2016, 11:47 p.m., original iPhone file. Never edited. I can provide the digital signature to any forensics expert you'd like. The audience gasped. Even the DJ froze mid-step. Then Whitman Sterling Jr. himself stood, his voice trembling. "The property deed has to be forged," he stammered. "Our families owned that estate since 1924. I pulled up the Connecticut Property Records app on my phone and tapped twice. "Would you like me to show everyone the public records, Whitman? Property transfers are public information. So are bankruptcy filings. Yours from 2009, in particular." His face went gray in seconds. "You, son of A, actually," I said. "My mother was a saint." Patricia Sterling, his wife, broke then. Full, body-shaking sobs. 40 years, she wailed. 40 years we've been telling everyone about our family estate, our heritage, our legacy around the room. People began to whisper, some already checking their phones to confirm the story. Others stared in frozen disbelief. The great Sterling name was unraveling like an old threadbare flag. Meanwhile, Caroline's rage reignited. "All those payments," she hissed. "You were spying on me. You were stalking my finances." "I was helping you," I said, "every month for 8 years. I didn't ask for your help." "No," I said evenly. "You just cashed the checks." Laughter broke somewhere in the back. A groomsman, Brandon, raised his phone, filming. "Dude," he said, half laughing, "your father-in-law owns your house. This is insane." "Shut up, Brandon," Reginald snarled. "No, seriously," Brandon said, still laughing. "This is like a Netflix doc in real time. The broke dad who wasn't, that did it." The room exploded. Phones lifted. People clapped. It started with one woman at table 6, then another. And within 30 seconds, half the room was applauding. Not for Caroline, not for Reginald, but for me, the underdogs, the outsiders. The ones who'd never been invited to the yacht club. They were standing, cheering. Caroline's fury twisted into hysteria. "Stop clapping," she screamed. "This isn't funny. He just destroyed my entire family." She turned toward me, her eyes blazing with hate. "I hope you're happy, Dad. I hope this was worth it." "It was," I said quietly. "Your mother made me promise to set boundaries if you ever crossed certain lines. Tonight, you crossed the biggest one." "What line?" she demanded, using her memory as a weapon against the man who loved her most. She went silent. By now, Reginald was on his phone, whispering to lawyers. Whitman sat limp, staring into the void. Patricia sobbed quietly into her napkin. The DJ, desperate to diffuse the tension, asked if anyone wanted a song request. Brandon's voice rang out, "Play Money Can't Buy Me Love" by the Beatles. Half the room burst into laughter. Carolyn screamed again. I took that as my cue. I walked toward the exit, past tables of people, some filming, some frozen, some whispering as if they'd just witnessed a public execution at the door. Caroline's voice cut through the noise one last time. "Don't you dare walk away from me. We're not done." I looked back at her, the wreckage of silk and mascara, the ruins of entitlement. "Yes, Caroline," I said, "we are." And I walked out into the Connecticut night, leaving behind 8 years of silence and 33 years of fatherhood. The valet brought me my 2012 Honda Civic. I tipped him $20 and drove home to my small condo. The night air cool against my face. I thought it was over. I thought the storm had passed, but I was wrong. At 11:30 p.m., my phone rang. "Caroline, Dad, please, we need to talk." Her voice was smaller now, broken. I looked out my window, and there she was, under the streetlight, still in her ruined wedding dress, beside the black BMW X5 I'd paid for, against my better judgment. I went downstairs. She looked up at me, her face pale, her eyes hollow. "The reception ended at 9:45, she said. "Half the guests left after your speech. The other half stayed to film the meltdown. Reginald's parents are talking about annulment. They're saying I committed fraud because I didn't disclose our real financial status." She laughed bitterly, as if being rich is something I should have apologized for. Then her laughter died. "You want to know the funny part? Reginald's more angry about the money than the humiliation. He spent 2 years saying he was marrying down for love. Turns out he was marrying up the whole time." She looked up, her voice shaking. "I listened to Mom's recording again. Reginald filmed your speech. I've watched it 6 times. Her lip trembled. "She was right about me, wasn't she?" For a moment, I almost saw Margaret's kindness flicker through her eyes. Maybe this was it, the moment she'd finally learn. But then her face hardened again. "That doesn't make what you did okay," she spat. "You humiliated me. You destroyed my marriage, my career, my life. You did that yourself," I said quietly. "I just showed the evidence. Evidence you gathered by lying to me for 8 years. We stood there beneath the streetlight, our shadows long against the pavement. Her voice broke the quiet. "Do you have any idea what this will do to me? By tomorrow, everyone will know that you own the Sterling estate, that everything I've built came from you." "Maybe," I said. "That's something you should have thought about before the speech." She froze. The wind rustled her torn veil. For 30 seconds, there was only silence. "I will never forgive you for this," she said finally. "Never. I understand. I'm going to contest the will. Hire the best lawyers in Connecticut." "The will was reviewed by 3 attorneys and a psychiatrist," I replied, "all of whom will testify I was completely rational." Her face fell. "You really thought of everything, didn't you?" "Your mother and I discussed it before she died," I said. "We both hoped it would never come to this." She stared at me for a long time. Then she got into her BMW, Before she drove off, she rolled down the window. Her voice trembled, but it carried the venom of something final. You know what the worst part is, Dad? I actually loved you. But after tonight, too night to me, just like Mom, and then she was gone. I stood there under the cold streetlight until the night swallowed the sound of her car. Then I went upstairs, made myself a cup of coffee, and sat in the silence. At 12:47 a.m., my phone buzzed, a news alert. Wedding reception revenge goes viral, trending under #WeddingRevenge. 3 local news stations had already picked it up. I turned off my phone. Some lessons are worth $74 million. 6 months later, I sat in my financial advisor's office, signing the paperwork for the largest charitable donation in Connecticut cancer research history, $73.9 million to the American Cancer Society. In memory of Margaret Thompson, the last $100,000 went to me, enough to live quietly in my small condo until the end of my days. Are you absolutely certain about this, Matt? My advisor asked. I've never been more certain of anything. The sterling name burned for months. Country clubs revoked memberships. Bridge circles went silent. Reginald filed for annulment, citing fraudulent misrepresentation. Caroline didn't contest. The video of the confrontation now sits at 2.3 million views on YouTube. Caroline moved to Portland, changed her name on social media, got a small marketing job, deleted every trace of her wedding. She's never called again. The Sterlings still live in my house, $1 a year. Patricia sent me a handwritten note apologizing. I never replied. Some people say I went too far, that humiliation, no matter how justified, is cruelty. But those people never heard Margaret's voice, never watched their child weaponize love for status. I sleep fine. Last month, I received a photo from the Cancer Society's gala, a white banner above a hospital wing, the Margaret Thompson Memorial Research Center. Margaret would have smiled at that. She always said the best revenge against death is helping others live. Her rose gold iPhone still sits charged on my nightstand. Sometimes, late at night, I play her old memos, the happy ones, the laughter, the love she never got to see how it all ended. Maybe that's for the best, because some lessons cost everything, and some are worth every penny.